Michael Turner loved his home in the Pine Grove neighborhood. He had purchased the small but charming three-bedroom house 5 years ago, investing most of his savings into what he considered his piece of the American dream. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with well-kept homes and friendly neighbors who minded their own business. Pine Grove had a homeowners association, HOA, but for the first 4 years, it had been run by reasonable people. The previous president, an older gentleman named Frank, mainly focused on maintaining the community park and organizing the annual summer barbecue. HOA fees were affordable, and the rules made sense. No broken-down cars in driveways, keep your lawn mowed, and don't paint your house neon colors. Simple things that kept property values stable. Michael worked as an IT specialist for a local company, often spending weekends tending to his garden. He took pride in his property, planting colorful flowers along the walkway and keeping his hedges neatly trimmed. His next-door neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, often commented on how his hard work made the whole street look better. "You have such a green thumb, Michael," she would say while walking her small dog past his yard. "Those roses are the prettiest on the block." Life was good, and Michael had few complaints. He got along with his neighbors, paid his bills on time, and followed the community rules without issue. The HOA meetings happened once a month, but Michael rarely attended. He trusted the board to make sensible decisions, and they had never given him reason to worry. That changed last fall when Frank announced he was moving to Arizona to be closer to his grandchildren. An emergency election was held to replace him, and that's when Patricia Wilson stepped into the picture. Patricia was new to the neighborhood, having moved in just 8 months earlier. She lived in the largest house in Pine Grove, a 2-story home at the entrance of the community. From day one, she had made it clear she had standards and expected others to live up to them. Her campaign for HOA president consisted mainly of promises to clean up the neighborhood and raise property values through stricter enforcement of rules. Michael didn't vote in the election. He was away on a business trip when it happened. When he returned, he found a notice on his door welcoming Patricia as the new HOA president. The notice also mentioned exciting changes coming to our community standards. At first, Michael didn't think much of it. He continued his normal routine, going to work during the week and tending to his home on weekends. He noticed Patricia walking through the neighborhood almost daily, clipboard in hand, making notes as she inspected each property. Occasionally, she would stop and speak to homeowners, her face serious as she pointed to various parts of their homes or yards. "That woman is trouble," Mrs. Peterson warned Michael one evening as they chatted across the fence. "She left the Johnsons a violation notice because their garden gnome wasn't an approved lawn ornament. Can you believe that?" Michael laughed it off. "I'm sure she's just taking her new role seriously. She'll calm down once she gets used to things." Little did he know that Patricia Wilson, soon to be known throughout Pine Grove as Karen, had already set her sights on his property, and the small stone pathway he had recently installed in his backyard would become the first battleground in a war he never wanted to fight. The first sign of trouble came on a Saturday morning as Michael was enjoying his coffee on the back patio. The doorbell rang, its sharp sound breaking the peaceful weekend silence. Michael wasn't expecting anyone, so he set down his mug with mild curiosity and walked to the front door. Standing on his doorstep was Patricia Wilson, clipboard clutched tightly in one hand and a digital camera in the other. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore a bright red blazer despite the casual weekend atmosphere of the neighborhood. "Good morning, Mr. Turner," she said without a smile. "I'm conducting official HOA business today." Michael nodded politely. "Good morning, Patricia. What can I help you with?" "That's Mrs. Wilson, please. I prefer to keep things professional." She glanced down at her clipboard. "I noticed you've installed a stone pathway in your backyard without proper approval from the Architectural Review Committee." Michael's eyebrows rose in surprise. "The stone path? But that's just a small walkway from my patio to the garden shed. It's not even visible from the street." Patricia's lips thinned into a tight line. "All exterior modifications require pre-approval, as clearly stated in Section 7.3 of the Community Bylaws." She thrust a paper toward him. "This is your first violation notice. You'll need to submit a proper application or remove the unauthorized installation within 7 days." Michael took the paper, feeling both confused and slightly annoyed. "I've been here 5 years, and we've never needed approval for something this minor before." "Well, things are changing around here," Patricia said, her voice sharp. The previous administration was far too lax with enforcing our standards. I was elected to restore order and property values. After she left, Michael read through the violation notice. The fine for non-compliance was $100, with additional $25 charges for each day the violation remained after the deadline. At the bottom of the paper, in bold letters, was a reminder that unpaid fines could result in a lien against his property. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, tossing the paper onto his kitchen counter. Over the next few days, Michael noticed Patricia's increased presence in the neighborhood. She walked the streets with military precision, documenting what she deemed violations with her camera. Each day, more neighbors received notices. Mrs. Peterson for her bird feeder, the Rodriguez family for their children's basketball hoop, and the elderly Mr. Jenkins for not removing his trash can from the curb quickly enough after collection. The community chat group on social media had exploded with complaints and confusion. Many longtime residents were receiving violation notices for things that had been accepted for years. "She fined me $75 for having potted plants on my front steps," wrote one neighbor. "Apparently, they're not the approved variety in the correct container color." Another commented, "Got a notice because my garage door is slightly discolored from the sun. She's demanding I repaint it." Michael decided to attend the next HOA meeting, something he hadn't done in years. The community center was packed with frustrated residents. Patricia sat at the front table with two other board members who barely spoke during the entire meeting. "These new enforcement measures are necessary," Patricia announced to the crowd. "Our property values depend on strict adherence to standards. I've examined other successful communities, and they all maintain tight control over aesthetics." When residents tried to object, Patricia would cut them off with references to bylaw numbers and proper meeting procedures. She introduced a slate of new rules requiring approval for everything from the color of curtains visible from windows to the types of plants allowed in gardens. Michael watched in disbelief as she presented a map of the community with new designated zones of control, including a 3-foot perimeter around each home that she claimed was community aesthetic space subject to HOA jurisdiction. As the meeting ended, Michael overheard two neighbors whispering. "We used to call HOA presidents," one said, "but I think we need to start calling this one Karen." The nickname spread through Pine Grove faster than Patricia could issue violation notices. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, Michael decided to install a small water fountain in his backyard. He'd always wanted one, finding the gentle sound of flowing water relaxing after long days at work. The fountain wasn't large, just a simple stone design with water trickling over carved steps into a small basin. He placed it near his garden, where it would be visible only from his back patio. Michael spent Saturday morning setting it up, carefully leveling the ground and connecting the recirculating pump. By afternoon, the fountain was running perfectly. He sat on his patio chair, enjoying the peaceful sound and feeling proud of his handiwork. Sunday morning arrived with another sharp ring of his doorbell. Michael opened the door to find Patricia standing there, her face set in a stern expression. Behind her stood two men he didn't recognize. "Mr. Turner," Patricia said, not bothering with a greeting. "I've received reports that you've installed an unauthorized water feature on community property." Michael blinked in confusion. "Community property? The fountain is in my backyard." As I explained at the meeting, there is a 3-foot perimeter around all homes that falls under community aesthetic control, Patricia said, her voice rising slightly. "Your new installation violates 3 separate bylaws." She handed him another violation notice. This one included a $250 fine and demanded the fountain be removed within 24 hours. "This is my property," Michael said firmly. "I own this land. It's in my deed." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you don't understand how HOAs work, Mr. Turner. When you purchased this home, you agreed to abide by community standards. The board has the right to establish aesthetic zones." "Who are these men?" Michael asked, nodding toward the strangers. "This is Mr. Davis from Davis Landscaping," Patricia replied. "If you fail to remove the unauthorized fixture, the HOA will remove it for you and bill you for the service." Michael felt his temper rising but kept his voice calm. "I don't think that's legal, Patricia. You can't just enter my property and remove things." "That's Mrs. Wilson," she corrected sharply, "and we absolutely can. It's in the bylaws you signed when you moved here." After they left, Michael went straight to his office and pulled out the HOA documents he received when buying the house. He spent hours reading through them, searching for anything about a 3-foot perimeter or aesthetic zones. He found nothing. The next morning, Michael left for work earlier than usual. When he returned that evening, he found his backyard gate open and the fountain missing. In its place was a printed invoice for $175 for removal services, and a laminated notice stating that the area had been restored to approved community standards. Michael stood there in shock, feeling violated. Not only had they entered his property without permission, but they had also taken something that belonged to him. He called Mrs. Peterson immediately. "They did what?" she exclaimed after hearing what happened. "Michael, that's completely illegal. They can't just come onto your property and take things." "I know," Michael replied, his voice tight with anger. "But what am I supposed to do about it?" "You know, my nephew is a real estate attorney," Mrs. Peterson said. "He deals with HOA disputes all the time. I could give you his number." Later that evening, as Michael was taking pictures of where his fountain had been, he noticed something unusual at the edge of his property. There, partially hidden by bushes, was a small metal stake with orange flagging tape. He found another one a few feet away, and then another. Someone had placed survey markers around his yard, approximately 3 feet in from his actual property line. Michael took pictures of the stakes, then carefully removed them. As he held one in his hand, he noticed something interesting. They weren't professional survey markers. They were garden stakes from the local hardware store, the kind used to support small plants. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to Patricia's words. Community property. She wasn't just being difficult. She was actually trying to claim parts of his land as belonging to the HOA. This had gone far beyond the simple dispute about garden decorations. He reached for his phone and called the number Mrs. Peterson had given him. "So let me get this straight," said James Peterson, the real estate attorney and Mrs. Peterson's nephew. "The HOA president is claiming a 3-foot perimeter of your property as community land, and they actually removed your fountain without permission." Michael nodded, sitting across from James in a small but professional office downtown. They even left fake survey stakes marking what they consider their territory. James leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "That's trespassing and theft, plain and simple. HOAs have certain powers, but taking your property isn't one of them." Michael showed James photos of the missing fountain, the invoice left behind, and the garden stakes he had found. James took detailed notes and asked to see Michael's deed and the HOA documents. "I'll send a formal letter to the HOA board today," James said. "We'll demand the return of your property and clarification on this 3-foot rule they're trying to enforce." Michael felt relief for the first time in days. "What should I do in the meantime?" "Document everything," James advised. "If they come onto your property again, record it if possible, and I'd recommend installing security cameras." That weekend, Michael installed 4 cameras around his house, 2 covering the backyard, 1 for the front yard, and 1 facing his driveway. He also placed no trespassing signs at the corners of his property. The HOA's response to James's letter came quickly. Patricia claimed that the community aesthetic zone was established by a board vote during a special emergency session that wasn't recorded in the regular minutes. She insisted the fountain was stored safely in the community maintenance shed and would be returned once Michael paid the removal fee and signed an agreement to abide by the new zoning rules. James filed a formal complaint with the county property board and sent a stronger letter demanding the immediate return of the fountain with no conditions. 3 days later, Michael's security cameras captured Patricia and the landscaper entering his backyard again. This time, they were measuring the distance from his house to a spot where he had recently planted new rose bushes. Michael confronted them immediately. "You're trespassing on private property," he said firmly, holding up his phone to record the encounter. "Please leave now." Patricia turned to him, her face flushed with anger. "This is official HOA business, Mr. Turner. These roses were not approved by the Landscape Committee." "There is no such committee in our HOA bylaws," Michael replied calmly. "And you're standing on my private property without permission. That's trespassing." "We'll see about that," Patricia snapped, storming off with the landscaper following behind. The next day, every homeowner in Pine Grove received a special newsletter. In it, Patricia described a troubling situation with a non-compliant homeowner who was threatening board members and refusing to maintain community standards. While she didn't mention Michael by name, it was obvious who she meant. The newsletter also announced an emergency special assessment of $100 per household to cover legal expenses related to enforcement of community standards. This caused an uproar in the neighborhood, with many residents calling and texting Michael to find out what was happening. "She's trying to turn the neighborhood against you," James explained when Michael called him about the newsletter. "And she's collecting money to fight you legally. This is actually good for us. She's overreaching badly." 2 days later, Michael received an official letter from the HOA board announcing that he was now considered in violation of 7 different community rules. His total fines had reached $750, and the letter threatened a lien on his home if not paid within 30 days. That same evening, Michael noticed a group of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk near his house, looking uncomfortable as Patricia pointed at his property and spoke animatedly. He walked out to meet them. "Is there something I can help you all with?" he asked politely. Several neighbors looked embarrassed and began to drift away. Patricia stood her ground. "I was just explaining to everyone how your non-compliance is costing all of them money," she said loudly. "If you would simply follow the rules like everyone else, we wouldn't need special assessments." Mrs. Peterson stepped forward from the group. "Actually, Patricia, we were just discussing how none of us remember voting for these new aesthetic zones you keep talking about. When exactly did that meeting happen?" Patricia's face tightened. "The meeting minutes are available to board members only during pending enforcement actions," she said stiffly before walking away. As the neighbors dispersed, Michael realized the situation had moved beyond a simple dispute. This had become a battle for his property rights, one he was determined to win. Michael spent the next week diving deep into HOA regulations. His dining room table disappeared under stacks of papers, legal documents, and notebooks filled with his observations. James had advised him to become an expert on his own HOA's bylaws and state laws governing homeowners associations. Michael started with the original CCRs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions that came with his house purchase. These documents outlined the basic rules of the community, including property boundaries, architectural guidelines, and the powers of the HOA board. Nowhere in these documents could he find any mention of aesthetic zones or a 3-foot perimeter rule. Next, he requested copies of all board meeting minutes for the past year. Patricia initially refused, claiming they were confidential during ongoing enforcement actions, but James quickly sent a letter citing state law that required HOAs to make meeting minutes available to all members. Reluctantly, Patricia provided the documents. "Look at this," Michael said to James during their next meeting, pointing to a suspicious gap in the meeting records. "There are no minutes for March 15th, but Patricia keeps referring to decisions made on that date." James studied the papers carefully. Good catch. And notice how these meeting announcements were only posted on the community board 3 days before each meeting, not the 10 days required by state law. Michael also discovered that many of the new rules Patricia was enforcing had never been properly voted on by the full board. Some appeared to have been decided in unofficial meetings with just Patricia and one other board member present, not the quorum required by their bylaws. She's making up rules as she goes, Michael realized, and backdating approvals to make them seem official. While researching, Michael also connected with other homeowners through the neighborhood social media group. He learned he wasn't the only one facing aggressive enforcement. The Johnsons had been fined for their son's basketball hoop. The Darcias received violations for their holiday decorations being up 3 days past the allowed period. Mrs. Peterson faced weekly fines because her garden gnome collection violated the lawn ornament standards. "I've lived here for 20 years, Mrs. Peterson told Michael over coffee. "We've never had lawn ornament standards before Patricia." Michael created a spreadsheet tracking all reported violations, their supposed rule references, and when those rules had allegedly been implemented. The pattern was clear. Patricia was targeting certain homeowners more than others, and most of the rules she cited couldn't be found in official documents. His research also revealed something interesting about Patricia's background. Before moving to Pine Grove, she had lived in 3 other communities with HOAs. In each one, neighbors reported similar patterns of aggressive rule enforcement, followed by legal threats when homeowners pushed back. "She's done this before," Michael told James, showing him the information he gathered from online community forums. In her last neighborhood, she tried to force a homeowner to remove a wheelchair ramp, claiming it violated aesthetic standards. Michael also learned something critical about HOA law in their state. HOAs could not modify property lines or claim portions of deeded property without formal legal processes involving all affected homeowners and county approval. This 3-foot perimeter claim is completely illegal, James confirmed. She can regulate what you do on your property to some extent, but she can't claim your land as belonging to the community. Armed with this knowledge, Michael created detailed documentation of every interaction with Patricia, every rule she had cited, and evidence showing how those rules either didn't exist or hadn't been properly implemented according to their own bylaws. He also discovered that the HOA's bank account showed unusual expenses, including payments to Patricia's husband's landscaping company at rates much higher than market value. "We need to be careful here," James warned. "These financial irregularities could be serious, but we don't want to make accusations without solid proof." Michael nodded, organizing his findings into a clear, factual presentation. "I'm not looking to attack her personally. I just want my property rights respected and my fountain returned." What had started as a simple dispute over a garden fountain had evolved into something much larger, a full investigation into potential HOA mismanagement and abuse of power. Michael was no longer just defending his own property, he was uncovering systemic problems that affected the entire community. "I think it's time we called for a special meeting," Michael said, looking at the evidence spread across his table. "The whole neighborhood needs to see this." Michael met with James at a local coffee shop to finalize their strategy. A small table between them was covered with documents, sticky notes, and James' legal pad filled with bullet points. "We have enough evidence to challenge Patricia's actions," James said, tapping a folder containing Michael's research. "But we need to be strategic about how we present it." Michael nodded, sipping his coffee. "I don't want this to seem like a personal vendetta. This is about protecting everyone's property rights." "Exactly," James agreed. "We need to focus on the facts. Unauthorized entry to your property, taking your fountain without legal authority, and making up rules that don't exist in the bylaws." Together, they created a 3-part plan. First, James would send an official cease and desist letter demanding the return of Michael's fountain and acknowledging that the 3-foot perimeter rule had no legal standing. Second, they would request a special HOA meeting where all homeowners could attend. Finally, they would present their evidence of rule violations and financial irregularities to the full community. The cease and desist letter was delivered to Patricia and each board member the next day. It outlined in clear legal terms how the HOA had violated state property laws and Michael's rights as a homeowner. The letter gave them 72 hours to return the fountain and resigned all improperly issued fines. Patricia's response was swift and angry. She sent a community-wide email claiming Michael was attacking the board and threatening legal action that would cost everyone money. She refused to return the fountain until Michael paid all outstanding fines and signed a compliance agreement. "She's digging in," Michael told Mrs. Peterson as they walked their dogs that evening. "Now she's trying to make it sound like I'm the one costing the community money." "Don't worry," Mrs. Peterson assured him. "People are starting to see through her. The Johnsons told me they're tired of her constant rule changes, and the Garcias are angry about their holiday decoration fines." Michael and James continued gathering evidence. They obtained a copy of Michael's property survey from county records, clearly showing his legal property lines. They collected written statements from neighbors who had witnessed Patricia entering Michael's yard without permission. They even found photos from community events showing yard decorations similar to Michael's fountain that had been praised in previous years. The most damning evidence came from Tom Wilson, the HOA treasurer who had recently begun questioning some of Patricia's decisions. "I've been reviewing our financial records," Tom told Michael during a private meeting. "Patricia has been authorizing payments without proper board approval, and these emergency meetings where she claims new rules were passed. I was supposedly there, but I don't remember voting on any aesthetic zones." Tom provided copies of financial statements showing that Patricia had directed over $5,000 in HOA funds to her husband's landscaping company for special projects without competitive bids or full board approval. "This goes beyond just your fountain issue," Tom said nervously. I can't put my name on these financial reports anymore. With Tom's help, Michael and James prepared a complete presentation package for each homeowner, including 1. A timeline of Patricia's rule changes and enforcement actions. 2. Copies of the actual HOA bylaws highlighting sections Patricia had violated. 3. Financial records showing questionable spending. 4. Legal documentation explaining homeowners' rights. 5. A proposed solution to restore proper governance. Michael spent hours making sure the presentation was factual, clear, and free from personal attacks. This wasn't about embarrassing Patricia. It was about protecting the community's rights and property. The night before the special meeting, Michael's doorbell rang. He opened the door to find his fountain sitting on his porch with a note that simply read, "Return per legal request." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Michael smiled as he carried the fountain back to its spot in his garden. The return was a small victory, but he knew the real battle would happen at tomorrow's meeting. Patricia might have given back his property, but she hadn't addressed the larger issues affecting everyone in Pine Grove. One step at a time, Michael whispered to himself as he reconnected the fountain's pump and listened to the gentle sound of water flowing once again. The Pine Grove Community Center was packed. Nearly every homeowner had shown up for the special meeting, filling all the folding chairs and standing along the walls. The room buzzed with whispered conversations and nervous energy. Michael sat in the front row with James beside him, both dressed in casual but neat attire. I wasn't expecting such a large turnout for a routine meeting, she said as she took her seat at the front table. Tom Wilson, the treasurer, was the last board member to arrive. Instead of joining Patricia at the front table, he sat next to Michael, a clear signal that divided the board. Patricia called the meeting to order, her voice sharp and controlled. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that HOA meetings follow Robert's Rules of Order. There will be no shouting, no interruptions, and comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. She glanced at her agenda. Our first item is to discuss the recent special assessment for legal expenses. Point of order, James said, standing up. According to your bylaws, when a special meeting is called by the members, their agenda items must be addressed first. Patricia's face flushed. And who are you? James Peterson, attorney representing Michael Turner and other concerned homeowners of Pine Grove, he replied calmly. We've submitted a formal request for this meeting with a specific agenda. Tom Wilson cleared his throat. He's right, Patricia. I received their request last week. After a tense moment, Patricia nodded stiffly. Very well, Mr. Turner, you have the floor. Michael stood and walked to the front of the room. He connected his laptop to the projector and pulled up his presentation. Thank you all for coming tonight, he began. I'm not here to cause trouble or create division in our community. I'm here because I believe we all deserve fair treatment and transparent governance. Michael started with his own story, the fountain, the false claim about the 3-foot perimeter, and the unauthorized removal of his property. He showed photos, documentation, and the legal property survey from county records. This isn't just about my fountain, he explained. It's about knowing that our homes and yards are truly our own, and that rules will be applied fairly and legally. Patricia interrupted. The board has already returned your fountain as a gesture of goodwill, despite your continued violations. I don't see why we need to waste everyone's time rehashing this. The return of my property doesn't address the larger issues, Michael replied without losing his composure. Let me continue. He moved on to show documentation of rules that had supposedly been passed, but couldn't be found in any official meeting minutes. He displayed the bylaws that required 10 days' notice for meetings, compared to Patricia's 3-day notices. He presented a chart showing how violation notices had increased 400% since Patricia took office. Mrs. Peterson stood up. My gnomes have been in my garden for 15 years. 4 HOA presidents never had a problem with them until now. Others began sharing similar experiences, arbitrary rule changes, selective enforcement, and threats of fines without clear violations. Tom Wilson then stood and addressed the financial concerns. As treasurer, I have a duty to ensure our funds are properly managed. Several expenditures in recent months were approved without proper board votes, including multiple payments to Wilson Landscaping. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew that Wilson Landscaping was owned by Patricia's husband. That's a conflict of interest, someone called out. Patricia's face had gone from flushed to pale. These accusations are outrageous. I've done nothing but try to improve this community and protect our property values. If that's true, Michael said gently, then you should welcome a full review of board actions and financials. Transparency protects everyone, including the board. James stepped forward. We're not here to remove anyone from office or file lawsuits. We're asking for three things. First, a formal acknowledgement that the aesthetic zone rule is invalid. Second, a review of all fines issued in the past 6 months. And third, a commitment to follow the proper procedures for rule changes going forward. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Patricia. Her hands gripped her clipboard so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a moment, Michael thought she might simply walk out. Instead, she looked around the room, seeming to realize for the first time that she had lost the support of her neighbors. Her shoulders sagged slightly. I propose we take a vote on these requests, Tom Wilson said, breaking the silence. When the votes were counted, the result was overwhelming. Nearly every homeowner supported Michael's proposals. 1 week after the memorable community meeting, Michael sat on his back patio enjoying his morning coffee. The fountain bubbled peacefully in his garden, right where it belonged. The gentle spring breeze carried the scent of his blooming flowers across the yard. For the first time in months, he felt completely at ease in his own home. The changes in Pine Grove had come swiftly after that confrontational meeting. The interim board, now led by Tom Wilson until proper elections could be held, had moved quickly to address the community's concerns. Michael's phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Peterson. Have you seen the notice? Check your email. He opened his inbox to find a community-wide message from Tom. The email contained 3 important announcements. First, all fines issued during Patricia's presidency had been reviewed, and most were canceled as improperly issued. Second, a professional audit of the HOA finances had been ordered. Third, Patricia Wilson had resigned from the board, effective immediately. Personal reasons, Michael murmured with a small smile, reading the brief explanation for her departure. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Michael opened the door to find Tom standing there with a folder in hand. Morning, Michael, Tom said warmly. I wanted to deliver this in person. Inside the folder was an official letter from the HOA board. It contained a formal apology for the removal of his fountain, confirmation that the 3-foot perimeter rule had never been valid, and a check refunding all the fines Michael had paid. This is just the beginning, Tom explained as they walked into Michael's kitchen. We're rewriting sections of the bylaws to prevent this kind of overreach in the future. We're adding clear procedures for rule changes and enforcement, plus an appeals process for violations. Michael nodded appreciatively. That's exactly what we needed. How are other homeowners reacting? Relieved, Tom said with a chuckle. Mrs. Peterson has already expanded her known collection to celebrate. The Johnsons' basketball hoop is back up, and the Garcia family is planning the biggest holiday display Pine Grove has ever seen this December. The financial audit had revealed other surprises. Patricia's husband's landscaping company had been paid nearly $12,000 for work that should have cost less than half that amount. The special assessment funds had never been used for legal expenses as claimed, but instead went toward purchasing new landscaping for the community entrance, installed by Wilson Landscaping, of course. What happens with those findings? Michael asked. Tom sighed. The board decided not to pursue legal action if the Wilsons repaid the overcharges. They've agreed to return $7,000 to the community fund. As for Patricia, she had put her house on the market just days after resigning. Neighbors reported seeing moving trucks at her home yesterday. I heard she's buying a place in Oak Meadow Estates, Mrs. Peterson told Michael later that day as they walked their dogs. Poor Oak Meadow. They don't know what's coming. The following month, Pine Grove held proper board elections with record turnout. Tom was elected president, Michael became secretary, and Mrs. Peterson joined as the social committee chair. Their first official act was to approve a new set of bylaws that included strict transparency requirements and limits on board powers. Michael's case became something of a legend in local HOA circles. James even used it as an example in seminars he gave on homeowner rights and proper HOA governance. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Michael hosted a small garden party to celebrate the changes in Pine Grove. Neighbors brought food and drinks, Children played in the yards without fear of violation notices, and garden decorations of all kinds were proudly displayed. As the sun began to set, Tom raised his glass in a toast. To Michael, who taught us all an important lesson: knowing your rights is the best protection against those who would abuse their power. Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. Michael smiled, his eyes drifting to the fountain that had started it all. What began as a simple decoration had become a symbol of standing up for what was right. Mrs. Peterson patted his arm. "You know what the best part is? We're a real community again, not just a collection of houses afraid of breaking rules." Michael nodded in agreement. Pine Grove had found its peace again, with clear rules fairly applied and neighbors who looked out for each other. And whenever he heard the gentle sound of his fountain, he was reminded that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with anger, but with knowledge, patience, and the quiet determination to protect what's rightfully yours.